Some of you already know what decisions you need to make. You're just waiting for life to force it or something dramatic to happen. Welcome to the authority practice. And you might be wondering what is authority, self authority. And by the end of this video, my goal is to have explained it very well and give you a few examples. So, most people think that their problem is confusion. They think that they just need more clarity, more insight, or more understanding about what they need to do. But in reality, they almost that's almost never the issue. Most people experience clarity all the time. In fact, the real problem is what happens 5 seconds after the clarity has arrived. Because clarity is the easy part. It is something that is natural. And the difficult part is what clarity requires from you. And the moment clarity comes with a consequence or a boundary, a decision, or a change in the direction, most people start to negotiate with it because it gets scary. So that's where the clarity gets abandoned. And that's where the conversation about self authority really starts. So here's the pattern that I constantly see. Someone may realize that a dynamic or in their life that isn't working, and maybe it's a relationship that's one sided. Um, Maybe it's a situation that you keep saying yes to, and when you really mean no. Maybe it's an opportunity that looks good on paper, but internally they already know that it's not aligned. And for a moment, the clarity is obvious. You can feel it. One can even articulate it clearly. But the moment the clarity would require a decision, a choice, something changes internally. And the mind starts to negotiate like maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I should give it more time. Maybe I need to explain myself better. Or you may even think that this would change if I become more patient. And suddenly the clarity that was just so obvious a few moments ago becomes blurry. But the clarity, it didn't disappear. It was just abandoned and replaced with fear and scarcity and all these excuses. And so this is the pattern people don't realize they're in. And it's very common. I see it very often. It is a pattern people don't realize that they're in. They think that their issue is full of just confusion, but the real issue is they abandon their clarity the moment it disrupts a dynamic. And um, they abandon it because of patterns and routines and for the sake of making things less complicated or being problematic. But this is where the concept of self authority becomes the most important because unfortunately, It's a concept that is very misunderstood, but I want you to keep in mind that self-authority, it isn't a personality trait. It is not something you're born with or without. It's definitely not a vibe. It's self-authority is a discipline. It's a choice. It is a self-authority is a practiced ability to make and hold decisions from your own clarity more and rather than external pleasure. So this is something that you choose because you know that is best, that you know better rather than pleasing someone else. And there's a few parts to self-authority, and the first part is discernment. Discernment is, of course, we know it's the ability to organize what's actually true for you. So you get that often. And sometimes we stop there because, okay, this is discernment. We know that this is what's actually true for us. But then there's a decision that needs to be made after you receive the discernment. And the decision is the willingness to choose. Um, but just not just make a choice, but choose in the direction that is based on that clarity. And so after you make that decision, the third thing will be to have integrity. And that is the ability to stake to it, to stay aligned with that decision, to stand on business in that decision, even when it becomes uncomfortable. So most people develop um, just the discernment, and which is, they have awareness, they have insight, they can clearly see the patterns. But awareness without a decision, remember, it's discernment, decision, and then integrity. But to have that awareness without making a decision isn't authority. That is not authority. That's just an observation, and it is just self awareness. Which authority begins the moment you act. Time for decision. The moment you act on what you already know and you stand in it with integrity. So the part part of the reason people struggle really hard with this concept, mainly because they confuse self authority with other things. And self authority, just to clarify what self authority isn't, it is not confidence, because confidence is an emotional state. Authority is structure. And you can feel nervous, you can feel uncomfortable, and you can feel uncertain about something and still make an authoritative decision. Authority doesn't require you to feel fearless. It requires you to just stay aligned with your clarity. And self authority is not control, because control is just an attempt to force something, to force outcomes, or manage other people's reaction, when in fact authority doesn't do that at all. Remember, it is self aligned. Authority simply chooses a direction. So to have self authority, it is a self led decision that you are choosing to make. It has nothing to do with the consequences of any actions or anyone else's actions. And you decide what you're available for and what you're not available for. What happens after that is not always within our control. And that's the part of the responsibility. So, another thing that self authority is not is being unbothered. Some people think authority means emotionally detached or unavailable, um, or just calm all the time, unaffected by other people. But that's not authority. That is being emotionally regulated. Is not all that what being emotionally regulated is not just what self authority is. Self authority simply means your emotions don't override your decision making. So, how you choose to stand in your integrity and your decision making skills has nothing to do with your emotions. You can care so deeply and still hold a boundary, as you should. And finally, self authority also is not doing whatever you want. it's it's not, that would be impulse. It's not an impulse. Authority includes responsibility for the consequences of your choices and your actions, standing in it and owning it, but with emotional regulation and with discipline. So it is not recklessly choosing, it is deciding what is clear and standing in your integrity. Authority includes responsibility, um, and it operates from the consequences of your choices. When you operate with authority, you understand that your decisions shape your life, and you're willing to stand inside of that responsibility because you have navigated that it is not control, it is not doing whatever it is you want, it is not being unbothered, and it's not confidence. So when you have filtered those things out and you're able to make a decision that it's essentially shape your life, you're willing to stand inside of that responsibility. And that is self authority. So, just to give you a real example that I constantly see, is the real skill of self authority is much simple and much harder. And it's because it's the ability to stay aligned with what you already know. And even when it disrupts your dynamic or a dynamic. And because clarity is easy, again, this is something that is naturally done by default. But holding it when people react is the actual practice. So when you're making your decision and you are um, standing firm in it, standing on that, and when someone else react is the actual practice of having self authority. And so just to look at a more simple example, it would be, imagine someone realizes a friendship in their life has become draining, that they're always the one initiating contact or they're always the one offering support, and the dynamic really moves in the other direction. And at some point, clarity comes, it appears. You may think to yourself that this relationship is one sided. Now, that is discernment, but you don't stop there. Most people stop right there, and then you lose authority because instead of instead of just honoring that clarity, you start negotiating with it that maybe, they're just busy. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe I should give it more time. And so the dynamic continues exactly as it is, nothing changes. Now, imagine the same exact situation where this relationship that you have in your life has become draining, or you're always initiating some type of contact, or you're just the one that always offering connection and support. Let's imagine that, but this time let's imagine it with self-authority. So the clarity still appears, the dynamic is still one-sided, but instead of negotiating with what you know, what you internally know, your insight, you acknowledge it and you respond accordingly. Maybe you step back from initiating all the time. Maybe you adjust your level of availability. Maybe the communication um, is more direct, or it's not aggressively, it's not dramatic, it's, it's it is not victimizing, it's just clear. Like the direction isn't forceful. The difference isn't about your personality. The difference is integrity with clarity. Authority doesn't require confrontation. It's just require alignment. And so going forward, you make it where I am no longer available for this kind of dynamic. And that's it. And so if you want help beginning practicing self authority, it starts with something very simple. The next time you feel internal tension in a situation, you pause and you ask yourself a few questions. And I have three questions that I would recommend you asking. And the first question is, what is the clarity I already see? Without filtering out and putting emotions in place, what is evident? What is clear in front of me? Not what you hope to be true, not what would make anyone comfortable. What do you already know? What's in front of you? What's evident? What is that first emotion that you constantly feel? And then the second question would be, what consequence am I avoiding? Are you intentionally avoiding an uncomfortable conversation? Because this is usually where people abandon their clarity. Um, Avoid trying to be confrontational or trying to be the difficult person in the situation. Um, you don't want to disappoint anyone, or you don't want to create conflict, and you don't want to disrupt a dynamic. But authority is going to require you to be willing to face the consequences. And my third question is will be, what decision would self-authority make not what would keep anyone happy, not what would avoid discomfort, what would align with your clarity, your higher knowing, what would align with that. And most of the time, people already know the answer. They just decided, they just haven't decided to own it, to stand in it, to trust that higher knowing. And so here's the truth that I notice people eventually discover is that clarity is not something that's rare or invite only. Most people have far more clarity than they're willing to admit. What's rare is having integrity with your clarity, the ability to stay aligned with what you see, even when it changes relationships, expectations, or the direction of your life. Self authority isn't about becoming more powerful, it's about becoming unwilling to betray your own self and your own awareness. And the moment you stop negotiating with what you know, what your own clarity, your life starts organizing itself very differently, because authority doesn't make excuses. Authority doesn't create control. It aligns, it creates the direction, and the direction changes everything. So, if this is a topic that you've realized you're missing, come back for episode 2, because this is a series of how to align with your self authority and to how to practice it on a daily. Feel free to comment, like, and share. Thank you. I love you. And have a self authority day.